So today we're doing Lisa Wingate, the Book of Lost Friends. Whoops, there it is. Okay, got it. And I don't know, did we read her other one before we were yours? I know I've read it, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Did we?
Yes.
It? Yeah.
Yes, we did.
It sounded vaguely familiar. But
I never read that one. What's that one about?
Well, Elaine, you maybe remember.
I think it was like it was based, I think, in the South, but it was where there was an orphanage and like or like this woman would take people's kids where she thought they were being cared enough for.
Oh.
And then she'd put them, especially if they were blonde.
She would sell them to a better home with people with money.
Yes. And she was a real person that this other one wrote about, and I thought she was wonderful.
True story, yeah.
But she was actually stealing children and then charging people to adopt a child baby. Yeah.
Oh.
So another interesting historical fiction. So I haven't read any of her other books. I watched an interview this morning of her talking about this particular book, and I was wondering how old she was because she looked really young, but she's 57. It says she was born I think that's right, in 1964 in Germany, and then they came to Oklahoma. She was raised in Oklahoma and went to school there and spent some time in Texas with her husband, where she raised two of her two boys. And then I think she lives in Arkansas. I wasn't sure if she still lived in Arkansas or Texas, but one said Texas, one said Arkansas. But the Arkansas that she would live in is real close to the Texas border, so maybe that's why. But the interview was really interesting to watch about how she, it tells in the back of the book too how she became interested in this. It was somebody that was actually working in the museum, transcribing the ads from these Lost Friends ads, and they wanted to record them and keep a record of them because they were all these little newsprint things. And she called or sent an email to the author and said, this might make a good story. These are real people that are looking for their families, and these are interesting things. And so that's how she was going to write something else, but then she got really excited about this and she went on with it. And then another thing that came out of that interview was that in those days, when what year was that? 1875, 50 cents was probably more like about $800 or more in our money now. So that was a lot of money, 50 cents. I kept thinking, 50 cents. Yeah, I knew they had to save up, but I didn't realize what that, comparable, 800 would be a lot of money to save up for some of those people, So anyway, so they had to pay the 50 cents to put the ad in. Unless they had a subscription. But that doesn't sound right, because the subscription I thought was like $2 or something for the year.
I thought it was a nickel to put an ad in. I didn't know it was 50 cents.
One place that I think if you had a subscription to the paper that belonged to that church, you didn't have to pay. But then at one point it said 50 cents. And I thought that sounded like a lot, because I heard a nickel too. They gave the one girl a nickel. A lot of the people gave her some change when she wrote an ad for them. But okay, So how did we like the book? Who liked it? Did we all read it? Yes, okay. Did we all like it?
Yeah,
more or less. Okay. Why don't we start with Vicki? Why don't you tell us what your thoughts are?
Well, when I read the prelude, I guess it's called, the beginning, and then that kind of went out of my head as I started reading the book, and I thought, this is going to be another book about slavery and the evils of slavery. But then when the teacher would get interjected again, it really made me want to keep going, because I enjoyed how she, her presence in the book wove the past into the present. I guess it was the 1980s, but much, much more current, and certainly into the reality of the people who were living in that area in 1980 and the kids. I enjoyed reading about the kids and their how they kind of got sucked into these characters from the past. I thought that teacher was very innovative. And I told my husband after I read the part about how they had a constitution in the classroom that I think marriages could use constitutions too. Even though we've been married 50 years now, there are some things I think could be open for discussion. So I enjoyed it very much. I'm glad I read it.
Great, great. Okay, Barbara.
Glad I read it. I had trouble following, going back and forth like that was hard. I would just get into one story and then they would end. And then I started.
You know what I did? Well, Elaine told me about this. I didn't want to wait. I was reading the teacher story and I wanted to read. And so I skipped the other one and read all the teacher story. Then I went back and read the story. And I enjoyed it much more. I just didn't want to wait another chapter before I found out what was happening.
I did the same thing. I did the same thing, only the opposite. I read all the way through of Hanny.
Okay.
Because I didn't want to wait on that. I got about a third of the way and I thought, I gotta finish this. And I read all the way through. And then I went back and then I read all the teacher. And then I went back again. And then I read the clippings had to do with the teacher. All the names in the clippings were kids that were in the present. So I went back and then I read all the clippings and put that all together. So I kind of went through it the same way 3 times.
But that was I enjoyed it much more that way than trying to read it straight through, which I think I did the first time I read it. But anyway, but no, Barbara, go ahead and finish.
Yeah, I thought about doing it. Now after hearing you, I wish I had, because it was distracting. I would just feel like I got pulled away.
Right.
I think I enjoyed the teacher story more than the other one. I got into it more. It was just easier to follow, maybe. I mean, I'm glad I read it, but it was kind of confusing at times.
There you go. Okay, Jean.
Yes, I liked it the more I got into it. At first, my reaction was, oh, another time travel story. And so I thought, oh, I don't know if I'm up for this. But I did not read all of one story and then go back and do the other. I can't do that. So,
No.
and nor do I read the ending of books either first. I can't do that either. I think it's Elaine who does that, right?
I do that.
No,
I do
that's
it.
just wrong.
There's many ways to enjoy a book.
Yes, I guess that's just not something I can do. But I think I liked the story set in 1875 a little bit better than the teacher story. And maybe it's because I was a teacher for 35 years that part of me thought, oh, okay, this is a little bit hard to believe with the whole high school story and bringing the kids along. And so I was a little jaded when I read that part of the story. So, and I was more caught up in the action with the story in 1875. But ultimately, I really did like the book better than I thought I would when I started it.
Good. I'm glad. Ruth.
Thank you for calling on me last, because
No, you're not last. I haven't got Vivian.
well, whatever. I mean, I needed to be refreshed, and
okay.
I had forgotten that Elaine sometimes breaks it apart, and I haven't ever tried that. I love the book. I think I was on the same way as I've forgotten your name, Davidson.
Jean.
Yeah, Jean. Thank you. That what that teacher pulled off was very innovative and so on, but a little bit maybe out of what I could think she could actually have done.
Okay.
It's a very interesting reading. and I did like it. And I don't think I can ever get enough of the trials and perils that Black Americans had to live through and endure. I just don't think that I can ever absorb enough of that to get more sensitive and to be more proactive and all the things that should be happening. How I should be behaving in this present time and reacting to what's going on. It's pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm. We don't always realize, the author mentioned that too, when in the interview I watched, she said she wanted people to know that it wasn't all, it wasn't as easy, an easy life. Some people think that the slaves had an easy life, that the masters were very, sweet to them all the time. But she said it wasn't usually the case. And you could see that, she pointed out, from the little ads that were in the paper and the things that happened to other people. So, oh, look, here's a puppy. Maybe she wants to talk with a puppy.
She's my reading partner.
Okay. Well, what is your comment on the book? Let's see.
My comments? Do you know, I thought a lot of interesting characters, but when you were talking about that teacher saying, well, you thought maybe she was taking it a bit far, but remember her past, how she had a single, a mother who had an Italian husband, and she didn't have it long. So she grew up mostly with just her mother, but she was independent. They kept moving all the time to different places. So she was exposed to a lot of situations as a young person. Plus, as you found out at the end, how she had given up a baby for adoption at age 15. So that, I think, really made her, that person inside. So I guess that's how I would justify her really, doing the projects that she was trying to do with those kids and getting so involved with them. But and then the other part with in the 1875 era, I just thought all those characters were so interesting, to have the slave person who took care of the rich daughter, and then to have, a Creole daughter, because the master had somebody else, and then the three of them coming together and going through all this. I thought the story was very pretty clever stuff. I mean, all these things going on, it's like, whoa, so I enjoyed it.
Good. Okay.
And so did Jamie. Jamie loved it too.
Oh, good. Okay. Glad to know. Vivian.
I really enjoyed it. I had the audiobook, as I usually do, and so skipping ahead was not an option. But I think, Jean, I'm more this compulsive rule follower, so that probably wouldn't have happened anyway. I had the book. I was more intrigued by Hanny's story. I just was amazed at how resourceful and just determined she was. I just thought, what a great legacy, to her family that she was. And I kept thinking, when they were doing that story, my son bought a house it's in Menominee Falls, so it's not like it's down south anywhere, but it was built in about 1877. So I keep trying to figure out, if only these walls could talk, kind of thing, what was going on at that point. And so when I read books that took place then, it's like, well, it wasn't, where this house is, but it was the same time period. And so I just get really into that. I'm really intrigued by that.
Great.
So I really enjoyed it. I got the book fairly late, like maybe a week and a half ago, and thought, oh no, I'm really going to have to force myself to listen to. I was done in like 4 days. I was just like, my husband, I'm like, I had my headphones on like all the time. He tried to talk to me and I'd be like,
it goes fast. Good to know. Yeah.
It did.
All right, Sally, what do you have anything else?
No, I enjoyed the Hanny part of the story, I think, better than the current one. And I did say, I once I got into that, I just wanted to know how it was going to end. So I just read through the whole Hanny and got the end of that. And she was, yeah, so resourceful. And it was just interesting, all the people that came and went in that whole scenario, that whole story. And my folks lived in Texas for a long time, and just, it was interesting. Yeah.
But don't you think too with Hanny, how, you know, she lost all her siblings one by one every time that person
Yeah, it was horrible.
you know,
Yeah.
the plantation owner, how the life she led too as a little person, and you know how she just missed her family so much, and yeah, it made her such a she was such a good person, such a good person. I want to mention to you guys though, I don't generally read the whole book through. I might do a few chapters ahead to see what's going on. So I don't necessarily read one person go through and then the other. But I have been known to read the end of stories still.
Yes, we know that. Heard that before. And
Yeah.
that's, like you said, whatever works for you. But yeah.
Speaking of the ending, it was neat how it all came together at the end.
Wow.
I thought that was so cleverly done, where they were
Where they
reading. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Annie
wasn't
married the cavalry
Marshal.
guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was
Well,
really-
she married that fella that kind of rescued her, didn't she?
Yeah.
Or he really was Moses, wasn't he?
Right.
It was Moses and the cavalry guy. Yeah.
Turned out to be a U.S. Marshal.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, his name
Yeah.
was it Elam Salter?
Yeah, Salter.
No, and also then in the modern story, this Nathan was such an interesting character.
Mhm.
And
And
he had issues too with his family. Yeah.
oh yeah.
Don't we all?
The thing
Yeah.
that, I'm sorry.
Go
Oh, I
ahead.
was just going to say, we watch Finding Your Roots quite
Oh,
frequently
yeah.
when we can catch it. And so often, people whose families were slave owners, they discover in the past, seem to have just a really difficult time reconciling with the
Mhm.
fact that their ancestors
Yeah.
were slave owners.
Yeah.
And I think he says on that show that almost 100% of Black people in this country have white ancestors.
Oh,
And-
sure.
And one
Yeah.
thing that really struck me in this book is that now she lived across the street from the graveyard.
Yes.
What nobody knew is that the slaves were buried in unmarked graves all around her home, apparently. And I never thought about the fact that when slaves died, they were just buried, and there was no record kept of where they were buried, which I think is a really sad. It's so hard for Black people to trace their heritage anyway in this
don't.
country and back to Africa, and then to not even know where your relatives were buried. And the fact that slavery lasted for 12 generations, that
Mhm.
just really knocked my socks off. I thought, good grief, it was just on and on and on with these families.
And it continues today.
Well, yes,
Slavery, but those same things to keep
that's right.
Black people down,
That's right.
one way or another.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought, what I thought was remarkable is when, and I'm not going to get the name right, the lady who they brought along and she was out of it.
Yeah.
And
Oh, this Missy Lavinia or Lavinia.
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 yeah,
wasn't it-
something like that.
She called her
Missy
Missy.
He
Lavinia.
kept taking care of her and bringing her along. I mean, it would have been so easy, I would think, for her to have said, see ya. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was remarkable. I mean,
Yeah.
to her credit, yeah.
Yeah, because
Well-
she had bossed her around and treated Hanny very poorly
Mm-hmm.
when she
Mhm.
was with it. Yeah.
Yeah. when Hanny was little, though, she slept in that Lavinia's room because she was supposed to mind her when she was, when she was just a little 4 years old or something. She was sent up there to take care of her. So she kind of felt responsible for her, even though they weren't very nice to her all the time. I don't know. How did she turn out so good when they were always so mean to her? I don't understand.
Maybe it speaks to a loyalty, a tension of
Yeah.
loyalty that slaves have to some of their masters or their masters' families. I don't know, but if she hadn't been brought along, she couldn't kill her brother in the end. And that made quite an interesting scene there.
Yeah.
And how much do you think Missy or Lavinia, whatever her name was, how that she was understanding after she got that bump on the head and was trapped in the trunk? When she came out, she didn't really communicate. And was she coming back, do you think? Do you think she knew what was going on, or what was that all about?
Wasn't she also
thought it-
raped? I mean, wasn't that a big part of
Probably.
her?
Didn't say that though, did they? They just,
Well,
Yeah.
except
I
that she
kinda
was
thought
pregnant.
Animal
Yeah.
instinct. I kind of thought it was her animal instinct coming
Yeah.
out against that Jeff
Yeah.
guy. I think she knew his voice or his smell or something, and it just made her insides come out. I don't know.
she flipped out again. Yeah. But it would have been really hard. Yeah, it is surprising that they carried her along with them that whole time. And the Gina Jane, or whatever her name was, she was she was an interesting character. Yeah. I wanted to call her Janu, but the author pronounced it Gina Jane. And she seemed like a very wise person for her age, because she wasn't that old. Was she only
was
about
younger. Yeah.
15 or something?
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah, that brings up something too of our culture. How we permit children to be children and to be children and to be children way into young adulthood. And there are kids in parts of the world that are 8 years old, and they're the ones that are in charge of 3 others, and and doing the cooking and all that stuff. And so I guess the potential is there. Unfortunately, it takes pretty dire circumstances, I guess, to bring that out.
yeah, because the children that were slaves were working from the time they were 3 or 4 or so. They had, some of them were even out in the fields, and it just they had to do it. But it was interesting. And then that part about the left-handed family, where Gina, the ones in New Orleans, the author was saying there were whole communities of these left-handed families, that the plantation owners had their second wives and second families, and they had big mansions. Sometimes they even had slaves. Sometimes they were Creole women or women of color, and they were very well off, and their children were all educated, almost as well as the actual children. So, and the wives knew that the husbands went off for a few weeks or something to visit the other family. What a strange situation. I don't know. I'm glad we needed a contract for that too, right? Or
That's in that marriage contract, yes.
Yeah.
Constitution,
Right.
that didn't work out. But
I was going to say too, with the young children, my mother doesn't remember at what age she was basically farmed out. Grew up in a very poor rural community in Minnesota, so it's not like she was down south or something. And from what we can figure out, she was maybe 11 when she moved in with another family to take care of the younger children of that family.
oh,
So,
Huh.
yeah.
Well,
My mother did the same thing. She started out as, and maybe I've told you this before, she met the milkman every morning and rode along in the wagon, and she jumped down and took the milk up to the house and brought the empty bottles back to the wagon so he didn't have to get up and down. And she was very young, because the time she was 12, she was working in a household as a kitchen helper. So yeah, working at a young age is not unusual for poor families. Granted, she got paid and she wasn't enslaved, but yet it was expected.
Did they just forego school then at that age?
Yeah, what about school?
Well, I think
My mom did go to school, but she went from whatever house she was living at.
Oh.
She went to school.
and my mother was, when she worked with the milkman, when she got done with his route, she'd go to school. And then after school, she would go and work for the doctor and his wife and in the kitchen.
Well,
So children can be responsible at an earlier age than we're allowing them to now, I think.
Yeah, we hardly allow our kids to go out and play in the yard anymore. You know, they might get stolen, or yeah.
It's really frightening.
It's so much different with my grandchildren than it was when I was growing up. For
Oh,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
the parents used to send us outside and say, come home for dinner, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe,
Ring the bell when
Ring
it
the
was
bell.
time, and the kids
yeah.
went home.
Well, there's a question here that's asked about the symbolism in the book. Now, some of those things, I don't see, but did you guys see any symbolism in this story, or does anything stand out for you?
Do they make any suggestions?
They did. I was just wondering if you would.
Okay. Okay.
They mentioned the ladybug, fly away home. And, there you can kind of see that. And then the blue beads were something.
oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. What do you think?
See, that's what kept Hanny going too. But remember, the thread of this whole book, I mean, the part in the 1800s was, having found this newspaper, this Christian Advocate newspaper, the Southwestern, the thread of families being listed, and that they were collecting this and writing it in a book. So they kind of had this project going on while everything else was going on. And that was, well, I guess that's what the book is kind of based on. But I thought that was interesting. But I think that kept Hanny going because she was determined to find her family again. And those beads and everything meant so much to her. And, I thought, oh, is that really going to mean anything? And oh my gosh, at the end, it certainly did. But, I think that was kind of a driving force for her too. It's like she wasn't going to give up because she was going to see her family again.
Yeah. Well, it was really interesting that they happened on that church. Well, they were taking refuge in there when all the three girls were running away. And then it was Gina Jane that noticed the writing. Well, she was the only one that could read, I guess. And
Lavinia was out of it. So.
Right. The other
Yeah.
one couldn't. Yeah. But that I thought it was interesting the way, and then they were just posted up. And when did they copy it all out? When did she copy it down?
They
where did she
ripped
get the-
some of them. They ripped some of them off the wall and then left extra money,
Yeah.
and then took them with. But she copied some of them down before they left.
But
I
where did
think.
she paper?
Yeah.
I want to know where she found the paper to write them.
Initially, she was writing them in the margins on the papers she had, the
Okay.
ads. And then at some point she got a ledger book
Oh.
from
Yeah.
the lawyer somewhere.
And she put them in alphabetically. Yeah, that's true.
And that's all historically accurate, right? All those.
You could look it up
postings?
online you just look up for the Lost Friends database. She mentions it in the back, and I checked it, and it's the same. The little blurbs that are in the book are the same, with the exception of the one that she used for Annie. She kind of changed that one a little bit, but it was taken from one of the original ones, that she was looking for, a family was looking for all of her people, you know. So it's all accurate and it's all there, and they've transcribed it all, so it's all online, and people can go in and search that way too if they're looking for family. So I thought that was, I'm always amazed at these historical fictions when you can go further and see all the background and find out what happened there. But
Yeah, what I found remarkable too is that for all the illiterate people, how they had this sense of needing to keep record. So they had nothing less but than the oral, but told it and had them tell back to make sure
right.
that it wasn't like the telephone game, you know, where it gets distorted. They wanted it precise. I thought that was just remarkable.
Yeah.
And I was glad I wasn't in the link, because I don't know that I could keep it going right.
But oral history was important to a lot of people
True.
that have the writing skills. It
True.
was the Native Americans and the oral history. Yeah, it just kept impressing on Hanny. The mother kept saying, now remember, and so-and-so was here and she had her recited. I thought, oh, that's interesting. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm not sure I would have been as adventuresome as she was. I mean, they could have gotten bitten by snakes. Who knows? There were lots of bad things happening along the way, but maybe children, they were more resourceful, I guess. But what did you think about the town Augustine, where the teacher was, where Benny was teaching, that little town with the good school and the bad school, and
Good library, bad library.
yeah.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's the white privilege and the white supremacy, you know.
I had a feeling there was probably a lot of truth in it.
Oh,
You know, sure, that's just the way it was.
Yeah.
and I would argue, and continues. There are still
continues,
remnants
yeah.
of that for big
Yeah.
time.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't know. It's and then the fact that the people were on the school board, that their children didn't even go to that school.
Yeah.
They were there sure that those kids paid at that school, and I thought that was pretty ornery, you know. wouldn't want that to really happen, but I guess it could. The author also said something about the Carnegie Libraries, which there was in the story, there was a Black Carnegie Library. And she said it was true that people were offered the grant for the Carnegie Library, but at that time, some of the towns refused to accept the grant because they would have to accept all people.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And they didn't want people of color to be using the white library. So they refused a free library just because of that. I think that's, odd. Now, well, for the times, I guess that's the way it was, but then there were a few Carnegie libraries that were specifically built for the Black people that they had petitioned for. I don't know, they probably would have let white people come in, but they were just, they were organized by the Black communities.
Yeah.
So she said that was a true part of the story. So the library I first started working in was a Carnegie Library, an old Carnegie Library in Naperville. And they were amazing buildings. They were just so, unique in their own way.
How many of those were built in that era? I wonder, did it say in the book?
It didn't say in the book. I think she might have mentioned it, but I didn't write that part down. But
I mean, was it hundreds?
there were
across
lots.
the
There were
country?
lots.
Yeah, I would think.
Yeah. There were there were several. Well, could have been anywhere. But
I think that book that we read, the library book,
yes.
that talks about some of the history of the Carnegie Libraries, and
Mhm.
it's interesting. And granted, we're all book people, but I think libraries just meant a lot to a lot of people growing up, and in many people's lives, I think it was like the thing you did on the weekend, on Saturday or
Yeah.
after school, was go to the library. It was important.
Yeah.
There are
Grandkids still do.
There are 2,509 Carnegie Libraries.
Yay.
Built between 1883 and 1929.
2,500.
2,509.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's a
Not all
lot.
in this country.
A lot of
even.
money.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Carnegie must have had a lot of money, right? He
Yeah.
funded- yeah, yeah. And I guess the books too. Well, what about that library that Nathan had that was totally unused, that that the teacher was so interested in when, who was the young girl that found it for her, that told her about it?
That little,
That
she
was
was
that
kind of a
girl.
troublemaker, but you
Lejeune.
understood why.
Yeah,
Lajuna.
Laguna.
That-
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
La Juna, yeah. And was she really related to the original Juna Jane or Gina Jane? Was it some connection? At the end, they got tied up a lot of these,
Yeah.
yeah, I think she was.
yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to remember all those connections last night and they just weren't coming.
No,
So if you remember,
was-
you know. Mhm.
She was connected by the aunt, the aunt that was in the service.
that's right. Yeah,
But I don't think that was the Creole connection family somehow. I don't know.
that was a
You know,
different,
I kept,
can I just say something? Are we really talking about Creole people, or are we talking about mulatto people?
well, she mentioned Creole in the book.
she was Creole, the
Yeah.
girl,
Think so too.
All right.
half sister was Creole, yeah, because she spoke
What's the
French.
Yeah,
Got it. Okay. I missed that.
Yeah.
yeah.
The
Well, what's the
reason I say that is because when you look at the census from back then, you'll see a lot of under race, it will say either B or M. If like the family, his second family, his left-hand family,
Uh-huh.
were really mulattoes, correct?
Well,
Well, that's
What
where
the-
Juno
I don't-
Jane was. She was Creole. The mother, I think, was Creole.
yes, that's what I
Okay.
thought.
That's what
Yeah.
they said in the book, yeah.
Now, a Creole is a combination of French and white.
Or are they from like one of the islands? Just,
No, I think they came down from French Canadian. They're French Canadians that
French
moved
Canadian?
from the
Wow.
northeast of Canada down. They migrated down to the Louisiana area.
Okay.
Okay.
Whites didn't accept them either.
No,
Okay.
probably not. Probably not.
But they
Okay,
were
I
dark. They were
should-
darker skinned, right?
they had darker skin. I thought they were a
don't know that.
mixture. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I thought somehow she was the darker skinned girl
I-
as well with really dark hair.
Well, they said yellow
Yellow,
skin or
yeah.
planted
Yeah.
eyes, dark,
Mhm.
long, dark curly hair. So
Yeah.
I'm sure. Okay.
But they
Creole.
treated her just like they would have a African American. yeah.
Right, right.
was-
There were places she
wasn't
could
acceptable.
go. There were places she could get into that Annie couldn't.
Right.
Okay, it says here that Creole people are ethnic groups which originated during the colonial era from racially mixing mainly involving West Africans as well as some other people born in such countries as Africa, French, Spanish, and Native American. The process is known as creolization. So, and Louisiana Creole people, there were a lot in Louisiana. So I don't know why. Well, the French would have ended up down there, I think.
Yes.
French, Spanish, yeah, during the Spanish rule. So that's the definition from Wikipedia.
Yeah,
So what's
I-
the difference? What's mulatto then? I don't know.
Mulatto is a black and a white together.
Black and white.
Yeah, but aren't
Blood in
some
her,
of those
didn't she?
other
Yeah.
ethnicities, aren't they pretty white too? I mean,
Yeah. Oh, there
so
can be.
I was wondering the same thing. There's got to be kind of a fine line at some point. I mean, there's so many immigrants, but there weren't that many. There weren't that many maybe back then.
Yeah. Yeah.
So perhaps more English. what-
Mulatto would be just a black and a white person.
Black and
Yeah.
white, yeah.
Yeah. But the Creole had different mixtures with the French in there. I think that was
Yep.
important. Yeah, the French in there. Yeah. So, and she was a higher class than the black. So, that was, unfortunate for the story, but I don't know. Let's see, what else? We talked, the Blue Bees, we talked about that. We were talking about the library that they had. And one of the questions at the end was, what do you think Benny is going to do at the end of the novel? What do you think the teacher is going to do? Was she and Nathan kind of had an attraction, but I don't know what was going to happen there. Yeah.
I think they're gonna
Well,
move
that's
into the big old
something.
gossip house and live happily ever after.
Yeah.
And on the
can use-
weekends, I'll go shrimp boating.
In
Yeah.
the-
Shrimp
yes,
boating, yeah.
shrimp. And also they can use the billiard table now that they got all the
Yeah,
secret.
that's
Right, now that
Yeah.
they search off,
You're gonna shoot pool,
and she found the
garden.
Part. Oh,
what was that? Somebody said something. Yeah. So what about all those kids? I thought that project that she had with the graveyard, the cemetery project, I thought she did a good job as a teacher, but maybe she was pushing it too hard because she didn't really get permission to do it. But is that because she didn't know, or she probably just didn't think about getting the permission?
I think they decided she needed permission because she was digging too deep,
Yeah.
and that they didn't want all those truths to come out. So consequently, they found some reason to stop it.
yeah, because the principal knew sort of what she was
Right.
doing, but not so much. But you know what? If she didn't ask permission, then they couldn't deny her it. So what do they say about that? Just go ahead and do it and find out later what happens, huh? Suffer the consequences.
Ask for
Tried
forgiveness.
to ask permission. She said that to try and nail down that principal and he was like, she couldn't.
Yeah,
She tried.
He kept changing the subject, and
Yeah.
he did go and talk to him several times, and
Yep.
he did admit to that snotty school board lady
Yeah.
that she had talked to him. I maybe said snooty. But, anyway,
I have a feeling they didn't think she could pull it off. And then when it started to seem like it was going to be working, then they got more worried
yes,
that
yes,
some of the truth would come out that they didn't want to come out.
yes.
It got way bigger than that school then, because they never let her do it in the cemetery. It said at the end, and all of a sudden they're at the state capitol,
Right.
and they're opening the time capsule, and it got bigger than life. So I don't think they could get rid of her then, or stomp her down anymore, because all of a sudden it made them
Well,
famous.
it got notoriety, and they couldn't hide it
Yeah.
under the rug anymore. Yeah. That was pretty exciting to think that they could actually do that. And the kids would have had such an interesting connection with their ancestors and things like that. I just if you were one of those kids and you discovered your ancestors like that, I think that would be kind of cool.
Yeah.
But
I felt really bad for that one kid who said all my relatives did was steal
Oh, yeah.
and kill people, and he wanted to do a different person altogether because he couldn't find anything good in his relation. That was sad.
But it was really neat that the kids got so involved in it, because they really weren't involved in anything
Yeah.
before.
well, what was she trying to do? And when she came in, the curriculum told her she was supposed to do, was it Animal Farm or something? and or George one, and they couldn't. They didn't even have enough books, and all the
Yeah.
paperbacks were all ratty and torn up, and she couldn't get more books, and they wouldn't let her check. They wouldn't let the kids take books out of the library. That's why they started going down to the little library, the old Carnegie Library. Well, they weren't allowed to go to the big library was across town anyway. So, and then that little library, was that going to get built back up? Yeah. What was going to happen to that?
Weren't they going to turn that house into some kind of a museum?
Oh,
It was-
yeah.
Yeah, and I think that, yeah. And then the books that were at the house, at the mansion, were gonna go, some were gonna go to the library, I think, the
Mhm.
little
Yeah.
that had been depleted and everything.
Or
Yeah.
they were selling some to get money to do other things with too, I think.
Right, right. He didn't know what was there. Why didn't Nathan want to go back to that house? Oh,
Because his
his-
dad and his sister died there.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was very close to his sister Robin.
mhm.
And yeah, I think he just, it was too upsetting for him. But you know, he knew she was working on a project, and you know, that was part of the theme of the story too. And I think that's why he was, you know, giving permission too, you know, maybe to finish off the sister's project that was started that she
Right.
didn't get to finish because she died all of a sudden, didn't she? A heart
Right.
attack at a young age.
Right.
And
Right.
he knew she was working on something.
Yeah,
They never said what happened to Robin, did they?
she died.
died.
She was had a heart problem
Yeah.
from when
Uh,
the child, and she'd
Huh.
had some surgeries, but then she hadn't. Well, they kind of mentioned once, I think, that she should have gone for a checkup or something, and but that was and then she didn't. They found a note in her diary or something, didn't they, about where was there a clue there? How did they under the billiard table?
She put the balls in the
Yeah.
desk,
Well,
Yeah,
that
the-
was it.
the
Up in her room,
billiard
yeah.
balls in the desk,
Yeah,
and they kept falling out.
yeah.
Oh, that's
And
Right.
so Benny thought, why would she put the pool balls up in her drawer?
I think, wasn't it
To make
the
room?
teacher who kind of figured, I thought she discovered it and went
Right.
running to him to say,
Yeah.
look what I think, yeah.
we did. And what happened to that old cemetery that was in her backyard that was hidden? The black cemetery that was hidden under the orchard. Did they uncover that, or what were
They
gonna-
found a grid that had names and numbers of where people were buried in his stuff, in the
Okay,
Gossard stuff, and then they were gonna go out there, and I thought at one point they said the kids were helping her uncover those
okay,
stones and figure out who was buried
Yep.
where. I thought they
Yeah.
started working on that.
yeah. Amazing. You just wonder how many other, like you were talking about earlier, how many other unknown grave sites are hiding in the
Yeah.
woods.
Yeah.
Well, and then not necessarily here, but yeah, perhaps here, mass grave sites where there was a slaughter, I think, of
Oh.
indigenous people and they're all just dumped together.
Yeah, or even after the wars, the Civil War, they just didn't, yeah. We visited, there was a book. Well, I can't remember who it was. But there's a plantation down in it's outside of Nashville. And that was in the name of the book too, something about well, anyway, this lady retrieved all of these unmarked burials because they just buried soldiers in the fields, and then and people were going to plow and use those fields, and she tried to save these people and put them in a proper cemetery and identify them. And what was the name of that book? But it was a really neat story, and we went to visit that one time on our way down, and much to Al's chagrin, but we did get there. He sat went in and looked at stuff. But we walked through the graveyard, and each state had its own graveyard. And it just kind of, it made you stop and think, you know, it was kind of strange. But people kept Widow of the South, I think that was the name of it. And it was it was historical fiction, but it was based on this fact. And she, Widow of the South, yeah. And people would contact her, the soldiers or the families of the soldiers that didn't know what happened to them, and was a Confederate, and it was both sides too. But it was just, that was another most interesting book, kind of like the Book of Lost Friends. People were looking for their people, you know. But that graveyard just gave you goosebumps, you know, when you stood there with all the states had their own monument and all the people that she was able to identify. So, well, a little
I
gory.
think any kind of mass grave is makes people pause, stop and pause.
Yeah.
When I was a youngster, my dad was a chaplain in the army, and we were in Germany in the early 50s. And we went to Passau, to the concentration camp. And even though I was quite young at the time, I think I was 7 or 8, just the whole irreverence of burying people in mass graves struck me then. And when I read about it now, I think, you know, that's kind of like the final inhumanity to our fellow men, is to just, granted, they were covered up with dirt, but they weren't identified or any of that stuff. It's humans can be so rotten to each other. You know?
I think sometimes they do it for health reasons, just to get, so the bodies are covered.
Right, when they're
disease isn't spreading. I can almost understand it then. People want more people to die because it did. But it isn't a nice thing for sure.
Yeah, I think the recording, the way I think, is almost more important than the burial.
Yes.
true. Yeah,
Ashes to ashes, dust to dust, you know, one
Right.
way it's all gonna be the same, but yes, I think out of respect and remembrance, a recording is important.
I was actually surprised that all that gossip material had all that recorded, you know, whether they were indentured, whether they died on site, whether they were, it was very detailed. And I don't know if that's historically accurate or not, or if just he was a nicer guy than the other plantation owners, you know, because that stuff that she uncovered was very, very detailed. And
yeah,
accurate.
that would be interesting to find out. I can't remember what the others said about that. I do think they did use the identifications, but I'm not sure that everybody did it like you were saying. She was saying that a book that she used for background also was Help Me to Find My People. It was a nonfiction by Heather Williams, and the author mentioned that as one of her, it's about Black families and slave families that were trying to locate their people. And she used that as a reference, a resource for this book too. So I thought I'd look at it. I only heard about it this morning, so.
I think there was a point in record keeping, two things that I remember from the past, and one thing that I remember from Finding Your Roots is that inventories were kept and slaves were part of the inventory.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah.
although it may just say 13-year-old girl, if you know what plantation and what age, you might be able to trace ancestry that way. And then when census came about, when they became more formalized, I think they had to record people that way too. So those are two small clues we have to where people are.
And these people were their property, so they wanted to keep records of their property.
Yeah,
So,
it's assets for them.
yeah, assets.
People
Right.
were, yeah.
Yeah. Huh. Oh.
And you can only imagine what DNA tests now are digging up.
Oh my gosh,
With
yeah.
Who's related to whom and.
Well, the other story that would be well, Thomas Jefferson, what was the name of that book about his
Affair, yeah.
Sally Fielding.
Yeah. Yeah, that was an interesting one, that he was related to a lot of his people on the plantation. That's for sure. But well, here's Christina. So anybody have any other interesting tidbits we want to share? Oh, Jean.
I
Yeah.
just have one suggestion that this group, if you haven't read the book Cast by Isabel
Oh.
Wilkerson,
Yeah.
I think Ruth, I don't know if you've read it or not, but you seem particularly interested in the topic, at least today. So we read it in the Bailey's Harbor Book Club, and we could have talked for hours about that story, but it's by
What was
Isabel Wilkerson.
Author's name? Isabel what?
Wilkerson. Well, we
Yeah.
can't see it because it's backwards on mine, but maybe it's not for you.
Oh, no, it's not
I can
backwards.
read it.
Right, for you it
It's
wouldn't
fine.
be.
I
Yeah.
just ordered it on Libby before our meeting, and I'll get it in 15 weeks.
Oh, she also wrote The Warmth of Other Suns, I think, which
Yes,
was
Yes, yes.
of the people from the south to the north, where they thought they would get better jobs, but didn't always turn out that way. But that was good too. Yeah. So
I was way down on the hold list for that too. And I decided I wanted to buy the book just because I wanted to read it. And I'm very glad that I purchased it, because after it's been loaned out and comes back to me, I feel like I want to reread it. So I'm
Yeah.
glad that I bought it. So if you're really interested in the topic, you might want to consider making a purchase of it.
Yeah, I could do that.
okay. Any other comments? Next month is Dead Wake, I think.
Dead
isn't it?
Wake.
Perfect segue. I just want to say I have 2 copies of it here already, one regular print, one large print. If anybody wants it, there, Nancy's showing it.
I have it.
Okay. You want one, Barb?
I would like, but I'm on the whole list. for
Oh.
it.
You know, and
Is it-
I got a notice in the library saying my request for that was canceled.
Okay.
I should
Well,
look out, because
yeah.
I asked, when I stopped in the library just, I think yesterday, and she said she would put a hold on it, and I'm sure she did. I was
Okay.
confused by the cancel thing. Excuse me.
I'll take one if you get one too, Christina.
Okay. Sorry, I'm
I'm
not in the
on any
Zoom. So
list.
is it Sally? Okay.
Yes.
Sally, Barb, and Ruth. Okay. All regular print.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
Okay. And I do see that there's lots of copies available of both. So if you just jump in, anybody else, I'll set it up for you 3. And if anybody else still needs it, that's not here today, they should be able to get it just fine.
That's a
Thank you.
really, really good book. I think of all of his that I've read, I think that one was,
I'm gonna be
You're
done
good.
at 4. I'll just tell you
Good.
that.
Good.
Just wanted to let you guys know too about that the community choice. I'm just going to put that link in there again in the chat if you guys can see the
Okay.
chat. Just darkcountyreads.org. I just got our poster here. Well, you might not be able to see it because my thing blurs it, but nope. Anyways, May 15th is the due date. So
Okay.
by May 15th, get it in the online format, or if you want, we do, like I said, have those print forms here too. So
Okay. We'll check
Yeah.
on that.
Do you have
Okay.
somebody else setting up Zoom while you're gone then, Christina?
yeah, so if you guys remember Morgan, she'll be the one that'll be popping in and doing the tech hosting, and she'll also be the one to send you guys the links directly. So
Thank you.
she'll be filling in for me for that. My first day back will be July 13th, which is when we do the Keeper of Lost Things. my first moment back.
You will be the lost thing.
Yes. That's great, Barb. Yep.
it's another good book.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I loved it. Yeah.
Yeah. So
too.
go
It's
ahead.
good.
More,
Okay.
so that'll be my first day back, which means I won't be here before that to send you guys the link or anything. So Morgan will be your contact person for those things. So if Nancy needs to reach out about it,
I'll
that'd be
check.
Morgan. Yeah. And then
Great.
I have my staff here in the know on all of these titles too. So you can reach out to them if you need help with stuff, and they can forward things as well.
Okay.
So,
Thank
yeah,
You.
thank
Well,
you.
you enjoy your time off. That'll
Thank
be-
you.
Yeah.
Have a good summer, everybody.
You
Thank you.
too. You
Yeah,
too.
bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.